Thank you. Fine, thank you. Good morning, everyone. We're welcome to today's hearing. We're going to hear, first of all, from another firefighter witness, I understand. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Good morning. May I call Mr. Raymond Keane?
Comes. That's good. Thank you very much, Mr. Keane. Good morning. You're going to sit down to give your evidence. Yes, that's perfectly acceptable. Thank you.
Good
yes,
morning.
Mr. Keane.
First of all, can you confirm your name?
Raymond Keane.
Thank you very much for coming today to give evidence. It's much appreciated.
Is the green light showing on your microphone? It's red.
It's green. Hello, yeah.
Now you're
And
on.
if you draw it closer to yourself, then
Is
your
that
voice can be...
better?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, can you confirm that you provided a statement for the purposes of this inquiry?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And if you open the blue folder in front of you, hopefully behind tab A, is that the statement you were referring to?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And are its contents true?
Yeah,
And have you read that, the contents of that statement recently?
yes.
Hopefully behind tab B, you'll find your contemporaneous note,
Yep,
and you confirm the contents of that document are true also.
yes.
And finally, if I could ask you to turn to tab C, hopefully you'll there
Yeah.
find a sketch plan which was appended to your statement,
That's right, yeah.
and that's correct.
It is, yeah.
Thank you. Are you content that those documents stand as your evidence to the inquiry?
Yeah, I'm, yeah.
Thank you. Now, because your statement and your contemporaneous notes are your evidence to the inquiry, I'm not going to go through each and every aspect of your statement and note. I'm simply going to cover certain topics that arise within it.
Yep.
Now, if my questions aren't clear, that's my fault. If they are unclear, please say so, and I'll rephrase them and try and make them clearer. Mr. Keane, first of all, can we start with the basics? As I understand it, you've been a firefighter for 9 years, is that right?
That is, yeah.
And that since leaving training school, you've been based at Paddington.
I was, yeah, until beginning of this year.
And you were on Red Watch during your time at Paddington.
I was, yeah.
And at the time of the fire, you were still based at Paddington.
I was, yeah.
And it's right that Paddington's call sign is Alpha 21,
That's right.
and that there are 4 machines there, including Alpha 211, the ladder,
Yep,
Alpha 212, the pump,
yep,
Alpha 213, the turntable ladder,
yep.
and finally Alpha 216, the fire and rescue unit.
That's right.
Now, the first topic I'd like to discuss with you today is training and practical experience. And for that purpose, can I ask you to turn to page 11 of your statement? Unfortunately, these statements, they don't have paragraph numberings, but if you look at the first substantive paragraph on that page, which starts with the words, "I felt my training,"
Yep,
and you say in the third sentence, "At least once a week we do a drill for a high-rise conditions or a combination drill, and we normally use our training tower once every tour."
yep.
First of all, what would a drill for high-rise conditions usually cover?
So basically, we'd pretend that there was a fire on a certain floor, and we'd go about setting up the bridgehead and pretending basically like what we had that night, that we'd just go through the procedures, what we'd do and what we'd set up, and run through that. So it was just basically imagining that there was a fire.
And what is a combination drill?
So a combination drill, so you'd basically set up your pumps and ladders, so you'd set up ladders to a certain floor. So it was just combining different ethics of firefighting and putting it into one drill.
Thank you. And asking a basic question, what's a tour for these purposes?
Oh, so that's basically, we work on a tour, so it'd be 4 days on, 4 days off, so every 4 days we'd do a tour.
And what types of exercises and training do you use the training tower for?
So on Paddington we've got line rescue, so sometimes we'd use the tower for line rescue. We'd use it for ladder drills and then combination drills as well.
Now, further down in the paragraph at line 6, you say that your training is not particularly realistic.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Obviously, as a firefighter, you want to have realistic fires to be training on, but we've not got the facilities. We've tried arranging for the derelict buildings that are going to be knocked down to actually put a real fire in and actually tackle it in training, but we're told we're not allowed to. It's too dangerous because it could actually be a fire. So we have to pretend that there's a fire, or we have to pretend that there's some aspects gone wrong and we're reacting to that. So it isn't really realistic, but the training that you do is geared up, and it is a method of doing what we do.
Now, looking at the 4th sentence, you say we also have lectures. Who provides those lectures?
There are training packages from Babcock's. It used to be through the brigade, but since Babcock's have taken over, it's their training packages, and it's delivered by the watch members. So sometimes it'll be a crew manager, or sometimes it'll be the actual watch manager.
And before the fire, did you receive any training on firefighting techniques in relation to high-rise buildings?
Not that I can, well, I probably would have done, but I can't remember any specifics. I mean, we do go over quite a lot of different aspects of training, so it's hard to be specific.
Can you remember whether you received any training on what to do if there's been a breach of a compartmentation in a flat fire in a high-rise building?
We have had training. I mean, the Coanda effect a breach of compartmentalisation. So that's where the fire comes out of the building, up the window, and it'll try and find its easiest access back into the building. It will generally go into the next floor above. So we've been taught to put a covering jet when applicable. If it's so high, you generally can't do that. But yeah, so we have been taught about that. But
and have those lectures covered particular issues that arise when a high-rise building, there's a fire, and that building has cladding on the front, on the exterior? Did you receive any lectures following Lacknell House fire?
Yeah, we did.
And the lessons?
Yeah.
And what was the content of the lectures you received following Lacknell House?
It was just a training package, trying to find out what happened, what people had done on the day, and some conclusions of what could have been done differently, the faults that happened that day. But I can't really remember, as it was so long ago, what they were.
Did you have any lectures following the Shepherd's Court fire?
No.
Were you involved in fighting?
Yeah, we was, yeah.
And that was an instance, I think we now know, where fire re-entered the property.
Coanda effect, yeah.
And can you remember what firefighting techniques you deployed in fighting Shepherd's Court that were useful when you came to respond to Grenfell?
Well, we was called on quite late, and I think it's made 15 pumps, so we got there quite late in the incident, and we was deployed to do a covering jet to try and stop fire spread going on the outside of the building. We set up a jet from the ground. It's like a mezzanine level. It took quite a while to actually get access to that floor, but by the time we'd done that, the jet weren't strong enough, the water weren't good enough to get to the actual fire itself, and the debris was falling down, so it was quite dangerous actually standing underneath because debris was coming down. So we had little effect at all, really, and by the time we'd actually got it set up and tried doing it, the firefighters gone in and extinguished the fire.
Thank you. Looking at the second substantive paragraph on page 11, you discuss here the fire at Trellick Tower. I think that was in April 2017, is that right?
Yeah, I put a couple of weeks, but everything's a couple of weeks with me.
In the penultimate sentence of that paragraph, you say, after Trellick Tower, we had a watch meeting about what we had done and to go over procedures. In relation to the firefighting response itself, what learning points did Red Watch at Paddington take from the Trellick Tower fire?
Well, I mean, on that particular fire, they had a wet riser, and when the pressure drops, they should have a pump that boosts the pressure in the water. We couldn't get the pressure to work. The pumps weren't working for some reason, so I didn't realise that the fire safety expert would come out and he knew how to work the systems. So we learned that about that particular job, and it was just basically always secure fire lift, who would bring what. We had specific roles, so the BA crew would bring 2 limps of 45, a tick, the crew manager would bring the high-rise bag, so it was just learning what and drilling it into us what we'd do and what machine, like what stuff we'd bring with us to the bridgehead.
And what particular learning points taken from Trellick Tower did you apply when you came to fight the fire at Grenfell?
I didn't fight the fire at Grenfell myself, so...
Phrasing that in a better way, what learning points did you take from Trellick Tower in terms of identifying the best firefighting equipment to deploy at Grenfell?
It's hard to say because obviously we didn't really put the fire out at Grenfell, so once we got water onto the fire at Trellick Towers, it was out within minutes, but it's a hard question, so I can't really answer.
Okay. I'm now turning on to the events on the night of the 14th of June last year. First of all, it's right that you were driving the pump, that's Alpha 212.
Yes, right.
And that your crew manager was Ben Gallagher.
That's right.
And the other members of the crew were Harry Bettinson, Jim Wolfenden, and another whose name you can't remember, but think it was Jeff
Campbell, yeah.
And are you more certain that it was Jeff Campbell now?
Yeah.
And I think it's a matter of record now, but that you were mobilised at 1:15,
yep.
You were on the road at 1:17, and you arrived at the scene at 1:26. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And by the time you'd arrived at 1:26, the order had been made to make pumps 10.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, if I can ask you to turn to page 4 of your statement, and the first substantive paragraph on that page, you say in the penultimate sentence, "I thought it must have been cladding or something on the outside because this wouldn't happen on a normal building."
Yeah.
First of all, given your answer previously, you had previously fought fires in high-rise buildings which had external cladding. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And had Shepherd's Court been the most recent experience of fighting? And was it your view at the time, i.e. on the night of the 14th of June, that the rate and extent of the fire spread was in some way due to cladding?
Yeah.
What was it about your knowledge of cladding that you thought it may be playing a role in the fire?
Well, the fire at Shepherd's Bush was just one sort of plume of fire coming out the window, whereas the fire at Grenfell, it seemed that everything else was catching alight as well, and had a lot of reaction to the fire and was coming away, whereas it was completely different at Shepherd's Court.
Given your experience of fighting fires previously involving cladding on high-rise buildings, on the night, did you feel that you would be able to extinguish or contain the fire at Grenfell?
I thought we would, yeah. Yeah.
And did you communicate your views that cladding may be involved to a more senior officer and give advice as to how best to respond, how best to fight the fire?
No.
Why didn't you raise those points with a more senior officer?
Normally it comes down from officers to us. I'm not in control of the incident, I was just pumping, so he could see what I could see. So he's further trained and better trained than I am to make them sort of decisions.
Can I next ask you questions about the turntable ladder itself? Again, it's a matter of record that the turntable ladder's call sign is Alpha 213.
That's correct.
And it arrived on the scene at 1:32. Does that...
Sounds about right, yeah.
Looking at page 4 of your witness statement, looking at the final paragraph, in the first sentence you say, when the Paddington turntable ladder arrived, it parked right at the front of the tower by the main entrance. Could I ask you to turn to tab C of the blue bundle in front of you?
Yep.
And there, hopefully, you see Alpha 213 parked in front of what I think is the east elevation of the tower.
That's
is
right.
That a correct depiction of the sighting of the
That is
appliance
correct,
on the night? Now, could I ask you at this point, and Paul, could I ask you to turn up the LFB operational response report, which is at LFB quadruple 01914 underscore 0112. And you'll see in the bottom box there, Mr. Keane, an explanation of a turntable ladder.
Yep.
First of all, is that photo depict the type of turntable ladder that A213 was?
That is right, yep.
The commentary to the left of the photo says that the detachable cage can hold 3 people. Apologies if this is a question regarding the obvious, but would it be usual simply to have 2 firefighters in there to allow room for 1 person to be rescued? Yeah,
it depends on weight as well, really. I think it says there's a maximum weight you can hold, especially with the water being charged as well, that adds to it. So the more weight on the front of the cage, the less sort of movability it can actually do, and the less it can go out. So
in the circumstances at Grenfell where you were trying to get the maximum amount of water, in your view, what was the safe number of people that could be carried in that cage?
I'd say just probably 1, yeah.
1?
Yeah.
Now, this may answer the next question I want to ask you. To what extent could the turntable ladder be used to carry out search and rescue on the night?
I mean, if people could have got to the windows, they could have relatively got people out, but obviously their main focus was trying to put water onto the cladding that was on fire. So that was the initial actions of the turntable ladder.
Now, you go on into your statement to say that my plan was to set up North Ken's pump with a water supply so it could feed the TL, which could then put water on the building to stop the fire. And that's at page 4, the final paragraph, 5th line. Now, did you decide to do that off your own bat, or were you directed to do so?
I believe I was directed to do so.
And can you remember who directed you to do so?
I believe it was Mike Dowden.
And can you remember the words he used, or the gist of the words he used, telling you what to do?
It would have just been sort of to get the pump ready for the TL, because it was when I first arrived, the pump was in the way. It was right behind Gulf 271, so there was no clear access for the turntable ladder to get into where it should have been.
Now, you say at the end of that paragraph that there was a bit of chaos, but it was normal, controlled chaos. I understand what you mean by chaos. What was the element of control?
Controlled chaos is it's like a fire brigade term. So although there's, from the outside world, it looked like it's pandemonium, but we're rushing around doing our job, setting up stuff that we normally do. So it looks like it is. It's a real fire brigade term, that controlled chaos. But there was loads of people screaming and shouting, members of public around at that time as well. So it was.
Now, where there's a presence of control, usually there's someone exercising control. Who was the officer who was directing what you were to do and how to do it?
Mike Dowden.
And did he give, what further instructions, what detailed instructions did he give you as to how best to deploy the firefighting equipment that you had?
I didn't see him much after that, to be fair. It was just to set up the turntable ladder and the pump. After that, I didn't see him for the rest of the night.
Could I ask you to turn over the page to page 5 of your statement, and the first paragraph on that page, 3rd line down, it states the pump ladder was already using 1 hydrant, and there was another hydrant fairly close to the pump, but that had a really bad water supply and there was hardly any water coming out of it. Now, so we can locate these 2 hydrants, could I ask Paul to turn up extract from Barbara Lane's report? The reference is BLAR quadruple 0 00 12 _ 11. Now, Mr. Keane, are you able to help us identify, first of all, which hydrant was servicing the pump ladder?
I don't know which one was servicing the pump ladder.
And which one had the really bad water supply?
So, as we're looking at the building, I take it the bottom part is the east side, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, so the one that had really bad was the one that said hydrant, no sign.
Okay. And just
sorry, is that the one
that I was really bad? The one that said hydrant, no sign.
Yeah, but
33 metres away.
There are 3 that say hydrant, no sign.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that too far away. So the one that had 33 metres next to it.
Oh, right, thank you.
Now, it may be easier if we turn to tab C of the documents in front of you, which is the sketch that you provided to support your witness statement, which is at MET 000-13058-1. Just wait for that to come on the screen. And are you able to, using the benefit of your own sketch, identify the hydrant that was servicing the pump ladder?
I don't believe I drawed on where the pump ladder was plugged into, to be fair. I didn't set that up, so I don't know where that was getting its water from.
Okay. You go on to say in the first paragraph at the top of page 5 that I used the MDT to locate another hydrant with a good supply up on the main road. I think it was on Grenfell Road. Now, if we can go back to the extract from the Barbara Lane report, BLAR 12_11. The good hydrant that you located, is that identified anywhere on that map?
I'm not sure if it's the one that says 23 metres, because as I was trying to set it up, other crews were coming on and they actually plugged into the hydrant itself and tested it. So I was down at the pump end of the operation, bowling lengths out from the pump up towards the road. So I'm not sure if it's where it says 23 metres or if it was further up.
If I can help, this may help. If we can go back to your own sketch plan at MET 000130058-1. Does this sketch plan help you answer the question?
It shows it was further up Grenfell Road, but I don't know how far or if there's more than one hydrant on that location.
Now, doing the best you can now, how long did it take between the TL arriving at the scene and for it to start to become operational and firing water at the tower?
Maybe 10 to 15 minutes.
So if it arrived at 1:32, somewhere between 1:42 and 1:47 or thereabouts?
Maybe, yeah. It's hard to tell, really.
In terms of the fire spread on the building itself, are you now able to remember the extent to which the fire spread between the time the TL arrived and the time the TL became operational?
Not really. I remember it as we was driving to the Grenfell itself. We was driving up to it. We could clearly see it was 3 floors. But actually trying to get to the building itself and get to the entrance and get to the building entrance, it had pretty much spread the whole east side of the building.
One of the questions that have been asked to be put to you is what effect do you think the time taken to secure a water supply for the TL had on the effectiveness of the firefighting operation?
I don't know. I mean, once we got the water on there, it didn't seem to it had very little effect when we was putting water on it anyway. So I don't know if you would have put water on it sooner, it would have made any difference. If you would have put a covering jet on it before, would that made any difference? I don't know.
Okay. Now, the next topic I want to talk to you about is the duration of the operation of the TL itself. So, for these purposes, I'd like to take Mr. Keane to some photos from Barbara Lane's report. They show the building on fire. So I think it's appropriate to provide a trigger warning, not only to those here, but those viewing online and elsewhere.
I think that would be right.
And if we just take 30 seconds for that. But whilst that time is taken by people if they want to move away, could I ask you the first question? Was the turntable ladder the only aerial appliance that was in use at this time, at around 1:42, 1:47? I think that's probably sufficient time, sir.
Yes, all right. Let's have a look at these pictures.
Paul, might I ask you to turn up photos from the Barbara Lane report, *000012_0015 and figure 1711. Now, Mr. Keane, this is timed at 1:52. You'll see that an aerial appliance is identified using a very large white arrow.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of the record, can you confirm that that is the turntable ladder or not?
It does look like a turntable ladder, yeah.
And if we now turn to figure 17.12, which is over the page, that, as you see, is timed at 1:54. Again, are you able to confirm whether the aerial appliance identified using the white arrow and encircled, and the water stream being encircled in the red circle, was the turntable ladder?
Yeah, it does look like a turntable ladder.
Finally, could we turn to figure 17.13, which is just below. Again, this is timed at 5 minutes past 2 in the morning. Again, are you able to confirm that the triple ladder identified there is from the turntable ladder?
Yeah, and that's crew manager Dan Harriman in a cage.
And finally, could I ask you to turn to figure 17.14, just over the page? That is a photograph timed at 22 minutes past 2 in the morning. And can you confirm that no aerial appliance is apparent on that photo?
There's no aerial appliance on there, no.
Would it be fair to assume then that the turntable ladder had stopped operations before 22 minutes past 2?
No, because they was trying. At one point, they tried reversing it back to try and make a rescue from the south side of the building. So it might, in that picture, it might have been doing it then at that time, but I don't know.
Always a difficult question. Can you remember how soon after 1:47 that attempted rescue took place?
I don't know. I didn't. There was no big clock.
Now, turning now to back to your job operating,
Yep.
monitoring the pump rather. Could I turn back to tab C of the bundle and the sketch plan appended to your statement?
Yep.
Which is MET 000-13058-1. Now, can you help us? A213 is there identified in front of the east elevation.
Yep.
Whilst you're monitoring the pump, do you have to stand close by to it throughout?
Generally, yeah.
And on what side, where were you standing, or where were you
So
most
where you
frequently
see
found?
Golf 272, and you've got the two lines coming out the back, I
Yeah.
was standing there.
Right. And during the course of the operation of the turntable ladder, you stayed roughly in that
Pretty
area?
much, yeah.
And so throughout that, you must have had a very clear view of the eastern elevation of the tower.
Yep.
And you would be able to see the extent of fire spread
Yep.
as it went on. And so presumably from that, you were able to assess the effectiveness of the firefighting operation using the turntable ladder.
Yep.
And overall, what was your assessment of the effectiveness?
It had
of
little
that?
effect at all.
Now, I'll come on to the question of effectiveness in more detail later, but if I can just deal finally with the operation of the turntable ladder itself. At page 6 of your witness statement, you say in the first substantive paragraph on that page, line 2, although in ideal conditions the TL can extend to about 10 floors, they could not get that high on this occasion as it was not a straight pitch. They had to position the TL quite far back, and there were trees in the way, so it was only reaching the 7th or 8th floor. Also, debris such as cladding was falling down. Sometimes it was small bits, but other times it was massive pieces of plastic and rubber. So I'm just going to ask Mr. Keane to look at some further photos from
Right.
Dr. Lane's report. And so if I can give a further trigger warning, they do say the building on fire.
Yes, thank you.
But in the meantime, Paul, could you please set up again figure 17.11? I think if you could show that now.
Yes, I think that's right.
Now, my questions here are directed to how far or high up the turntable ladder could reach. Dr. Lane has identified level 9 as to where presumably the cage was from which the water was fired. Would you agree that level 9 is the correct designation in that photograph?
I don't know. I can't see the bottom of the picture, so you can't count the floors.
Fair point.
I mean, you could count down from 24 to, and then you know where it is. It's one way of doing it.
Yep.
If we can turn to, this might be more helpful, Barbara Lane 8_21, figure 13.14. That gives, perhaps, relatively speaking, a better perspective. But does that photo show the full extent of the turntable ladder?
Yeah, it's fully extended, yeah.
And if Dr. Lane is right, it extends just
Slightly above,
beyond.
yeah.
Thank you. Could you help us just on one minor point of detail? What is the distance between the tower and those trees? Sometimes perspective on photos isn't ideal. Can you remember?
Maybe 7 metres, 8 metres. The turntable ladder's about 3 metres wide, I believe. Not the actual cage, the actual chassis.
Now, at page 6, on the second substantive paragraph of that page, you say this. After a while, it became impossible for the TL to remain in that position. It was too dangerous for the operators at the top and bottom as the debris was crashing down around them. Also, the machine was getting damaged as the debris was smashing into it. It was best to move it out the way. I don't know if it was having much effect anyway. They were trying to put water onto the fire, but it was just pissing in the wind, hardly making any difference at all. I've never seen it like that before. Now, looking at the various elements within that particular paragraph, you say you don't know who made the order to withdraw the turntable ladder,
No.
but who usually, what seniority of officer would usually make that type of order?
It's between the watch manager and the crew manager in charge of the machine. Between them two, it would normally be a joint decision. Not all watch managers know the effectiveness of the other machines, because I see a watch manager from North Kent, he's only got 2 machines, which are standard. Other stations like Paddington, you've got an FRU station and a TL turntable ladder. So most stations don't know the effectiveness of these machines and what they can do and what they can't do and the extent of their capabilities. So therefore they would draw on the information from the crew manager and ask him what he thinks is, if it's effective or not, and then they'll make a decision together.
So the reasons you give there in your statement, they're the reasons that you assume to be correct for removing the turntable ladder, as opposed to repeating the reasons that you were informed of on the night?
Well, I was standing close by to Chris Reynolds, who was actually operating it from the bottom, and he said that it was too dangerous. So that's where I got my information from.
And so, do you think it was he who actually made the decision in
Well,
reality?
Chris Reynolds? No.
No, okay. Could we look at your contemporaneous note now, which is at quadruple 05593? And roughly half the way down that page, you say TL was knocking flames back well until it was too dangerous for crews as debris was falling everywhere. I think, Paul, it is this bit of the contemporaneous there, note it there, if you could amplify. TL was knocking flames back well until it was too dangerous for crews as debris was falling everywhere. Now, looking at that statement there, Mr. Keane, it looks like at the time, so in the immediate aftermath of the fire, you had a more positive view of the effectiveness of the turntable ladder firefighting operation. Is that a fair summary of that?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure if that was just where I was tired or exhausted, or it was just literally after one of the worst shifts I've ever done. So whether it was knocking it back well until we got too high and the TL couldn't reach it, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Now, if you're unhappy about the effectiveness of the firefighting operation conducted from the turntable ladder, did you communicate that to anyone on the night?
No.
No. Is that something you'd ordinarily raise with an immediately senior officer?
Well, there was a crew manager in charge on the cage who had a bit of clear view and knew what was going on, or a closer angle than I was.
And so you'd be content for the crew manager to take
Yeah,
the
they
view
would
as the
normally,
effectiveness?
yeah.
If the firefighting exercise was not as effective as you'd wanted it to be, by that stage in the evening when it appears to have started to cease operations, so let's say 20 minutes past 2 in the morning, would the turntable ladder have had any further utility, for example, for conducting search and rescue missions at that stage in the evening?
I mean, it could have been, but I don't know if there was debris falling down everywhere, so it was really dangerous for anyone to be in a cage to actually try and make a rescue anyway. So I thought that was the decision to make, that it wouldn't be used because it was actually too dangerous to put someone in direct way of something falling on top of them.
Thank you. Could I now ask you to turn back to page 6 of your witness statement, and apologies for jumping round.
That's fine.
And it's really the last paragraph on that page. And you say on the second line, I think there was someone hanging out a window, but they couldn't physically get to the right position. Were you aware of the instructions and the background that led to that attempted rescue?
I wasn't aware of it at the time, but speaking to Chris Reynolds, who was actually operating it, he told me afterwards that they tried removing the TL further back to try and get to that window, but they couldn't reach it.
One final matter, just whilst we're discussing this. Did you at any stage go into the tower itself?
No.
The next topic I'd like to discuss with you is the ground monitor and its operation. And you say at page 7 of your statement that you were instructed by watch manager Steve Collins to use the pump to supply the ground monitor positioned on top of the carport.
Yeah.
First of all, what is a ground monitor and what does it do?
It's just basically like a massive jet, so it chucks a lot more water at a projected fire than you would be able to with a normal jet, and it's less labour extensive, so you haven't got to physically hold it. You can put it in a position and it will do its job. And
so it's very manoeuvrable. Is that a fair observation?
It is manoeuvrable, but it's obviously, once you get into place, you can move it around. But yeah.
So there's one final photo I'd like to, or set of photos rather, from Dr. Lane's report. So again, a further trigger warning. If I can give 30 seconds for people to make arrangements. But Paul, might I ask you to tee up from Dr. Lane's report, quadruple 0 00 12 underscore 23, which hopefully is figure 17.21. And so with your permission, if I can show that photo now.
Yes.
Asking a basic question, Mr. Keane, you'll see in the bottom right side of that photograph a red circle within which is identified a machine which is said to be a ground monitor. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Could I ask Paul to go back a page to figure 17.20? They're clearer photos. Do they also show ground monitors?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Can you remember what time the ground monitor was set up?
It literally would have been only sort of a few minutes after the turntable was no longer in use.
So
I can't really put a specific time on it.
You can't?
No.
Okay.
You may be able to help me, Mr. Kinnear. The caption on that photograph seems to suggest that it's handheld hose.
I think that's resting on top of, it looks like a slide, just to give it a bit more projection and height and angle. Right. It should ideally be on the ground.
Yeah, there's a question asking whether it was a ground monitor or not.
That may not be because it's a 45. I'm not sure if they were using a 45 mil going into it.
Children's slide, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that's the question. Is it?
On the right, it doesn't look like they actually handhold. They're not holding it. It's like fixed on top of the slide.
Okay.
I can't see him holding that. He's got his right hand down, so I don't.
Can you just describe, in your own words, what a ground monitor looks like? I have in my mind the picture of a sort of
just basically
tripod.
It's like a tripod, yeah, with a massive, so big jet at the end of it, and it's so that big, long.
Yeah.
And it's angled up with 3 prongs that come out.
Three legs, is it?
Yeah, it's just to give it some sort of base so it doesn't topple over.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
I think from memory, sir, unfortunately it's not one of the bits of kit that are identified in the operational response report, but it may well be looking as to where it was positioned, Mr. Keane. Paul, could I ask you to turn up a further photo from Dr. Lane's report, quadruple 0 000 8 underscore 24, figure 1317. Now, you'll see in the second box from the bottom on the right-hand side, it says jet on south elevation observed at various times between 0241 and 0333. Does that mark correctly the position of the ground monitor?
Yeah, that looks in the right position, yeah.
And the estimated period of its use between 241 and 333, does that sound about right to you, bearing in mind your caveats regarding your recollection of precise times?
It was my recollection. The ground monitor was being used throughout the whole night until we were pretty much relieved at 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning.
Can I go back just one step and looking at what the ground monitor is? My recollection was entirely incorrect, and that a ground monitor is set out in the operational response report at page 100. And could Paul put that up on the screen, please? And there you'll see.
Yeah, that's it there.
Box. That is a ground monitor.
That is, yeah.
That's a very good description. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can you remember, doing the best you can now, what was the greatest extent of the ground monitor's reach? What floor could it get to?
I'm not too sure. If memory serves right, if you have the pictures of the building, you can clearly see how far it reached up because of the fire spread actually didn't damage any part where the ground monitor was working.
Okay. How much higher than the 10th floor could the ground monitor jet reach if the pressure had been increased to 15 bar, for example?
Maybe 2 or 3 floors.
Okay. Comparing the relative effectiveness of the turntable as against the ground monitor, in your view, which was the more effective bit of kit for, first of all, containing the fire?
I think the ground monitor, but maybe only reason being that the initial stages of the fire, it was burning up, whereas the ground monitor was protecting it from coming down. So I don't know if that had any bearing on it at all. I'm not sure.
In that regard, could I ask you to go back to your contemporaneous note again, which is MET *005593. And you say, I think it's 6 lines up from the bottom. We had trouble to supply ground monitor and had to keep stopping supply to wait for tank to fill back up. Again, it looks as if at the time, you were, on the day after the fire or the day of the fire, you were more negative about the effectiveness of the ground monitor compared to the turntable ladder. Would that be a fair summary of what you say there?
I don't think it's a negative. I think it was more of a negative attack on the supply of the water. It was the same with the TL, to be fair. We had to keep waiting for the pump to fill up with water as well for that as well. But I obviously didn't. I don't know if I put that in my notes or not. But it was just in my mind because I've been doing that for longer.
You mentioned that you considered that the ground monitor was the more effective device for stopping the fire from coming down. Did you communicate that view, that assessment, to any more senior officer?
Well, my senior officer was on the end of that.
Okay. And you rely upon him to communicate?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. The next topic I'd like to consider is the aerial ladder platform. And first of all, could I ask you to go to, and Paul, would you mind bringing up this document, LFB *001914_94. I think it's the previous page. It's relativity 94 as opposed to internal 94. And the top box, does that show the type of vehicle you're doing?
Yep.
Can you remember the call sign of the particular ALP?
I'm not too sure. I don't know if I'd put my contemporary notes.
When you started to assist, and just trying to get some idea of the timeline here, when you started to assist in relation to the ALP, had the ground monitor stopped working, or had someone deployed you to help out with the LLP? Can you remember now?
The ground monitor was always in use. As the water was going on to that, I was trying to help lay out hose for the ALP.
Okay. Can you remember roughly what time of the night this help was provided when you bowled out the hose?
No, I mean, it'd be call log when the ALP got on scene. I don't know how long after it was that. I don't know. Like I said, there was no big clock.
Now, can you remember whether the ALP you were assisting in relation to was the first ALP to attend or not?
The first actual ALP, I'm not too sure, because I could only see sort of really maybe two sides, definitely the east side and some of the south. There was no other ALP in that area. I don't know if there was one in the north or west.
Okay. And are you sure, I think in the statement you say you started to assist roughly between 2.5 to 3 hours into your attendance on the scene. Does that sound about right?
Maybe, yeah. It's too hard to be specific.
Okay. If I could ask you to turn rather to page 8 of your statement and the third paragraph on that page. And if I could also ask you to turn to the sketch behind tab C. Are you able to confirm which hydrant was servicing the ALP?
Yeah, it was the one that I originally tried using that hardly had any water coming out of. That had 33 metres and no hydrant sign.
Now, if I can ask Paul to turn up your sketch, MET 000130058.
Yeah, you can see just behind, I believe that's Soho's pump ladder. It says hydrant, and it's right behind the pump ladder.
Okay. And how far, are you able to estimate the precise distance, was the ALP from the tower itself?
I'd say maybe 15 metres.
And you say in the penultimate line of this paragraph, if we can turn back to the statement on page 8, and this third substantive paragraph on that page, and I'll read out. The hydrant they were using was one I had decided not to use for my pump as the water supply was poor. It did work a bit, but from what I saw, the water was just trickling out with hardly any pressure. Even though the connection worked, it was not effective at all. Also, the ALP was far back from the building due to the logistics of the situation. It couldn't get close as it would be damaged by falling debris. Also, there was grass all around the tower, and you are not meant to put such heavy machinery on that surface because it could collapse. Also, the access was blocked by 2 massive trees. They were trying to go through the middle of them, but it was hard. It felt like a wasted effort. Could I ask you, this may be a question of the obvious, but why did it feel like a wasted effort to you at the time?
Because I knew there was hardly any water pressure in that hydrant, and the amount of water that an ALP or a TL would use, and once they'd set it up, it was just like they was using a garden hose.
Now, at various paragraphs on page 8, you refer to the problems you encountered with water pressure and falling debris damaging, severing hoses on the night.
Yeah.
Were you aware at the time that they were all that debris falling, the problems with water pressure, were also causing difficulties for the dry riser within the tower itself?
I weren't initially, no.
And did you communicate to any more senior officer concerns about water pressure as it affected the ALP?
No, I told obviously the crew manager that was in control of the TL that the water pressure was bad, and Steve Collins knew there weren't much water pressure coming through on the ground monitor, so I presumed that the people above me knew the situation.
And so you can't speak to what remedial action those more senior officers took? No. The next point I'd like to discuss with you is the positive ventilation system. And if I could ask you for that purpose to turn to page 9. And the bottom paragraph on that page, you say, during another conversation I was told by someone that a positive ventilation system was tried halfway through the night, but when they turned the fan on it just made the situation worse. Instead of clearing the smoke, it made it smoky everywhere, so they stopped using it. Do you remember who told you about the difficulties that had been encountered?
No, I mean, you generally know the stations around your station, and there was 40 machines there, so I'd seen people I'd never seen in my life before, so I don't know whose names were what.
Can you remember the circumstances in which you heard this account of the operation of the positive ventilation system?
Well, could just see it unfolding, so I could just see loads of smoke coming out, and it just went up around the entrance of the main building. And as you was talking, I was asking what was going on, and I was told that the positive PPV was being used.
Okay. Finally, may I now turn to the lightweight portable pump? First of all, in what circumstances would the lightweight portable pump usually be deployed?
It's like it's a small version of our machine, really. So you can use it in more access, like lifts or floodings, or if you can't get a machine in a certain area, you can use that as an intermediary pump.
And how heavy is it?
I believe it's 84 kilos.
And so, would you be able to carry it on your own, or would you need help?
No, you're not allowed to for health and safety reasons.
How many men would you use, or how many men or
women?
4
persons, not 4 men. Sorry.
Looking at page 10 of your witness statement, the top paragraph. You say, towards the end of the incident, Gareth Cook asked me if my pump could supply both the ground monitor and a lightweight portable pump. The LWPP is a smaller version of my machine, a square engine which weighs 80 kilograms. Water was not reaching the top of the building in the dry rises, so the plan was to install the LWPP inside the building. Did you discuss with Cook why water wasn't reaching the top via the dry rises?
No.
Did he give you any further explanation as to why the LWPP was needed?
I can't remember, no.
And so you did as you were told, essentially?
Yeah, yeah, generally.
Okay. The operation of the LWPP, when it's in operation, is it a constant flow of water or not? Or are you dependent upon
Depends on
the
what
tanks
you're getting,
refilling?
what you can go. It's just basically a relay. So yeah, it depends on what you're receiving in and what you can give to what that can provide.
Assuming a full tank, how long can an LWPP operate for?
Obviously, again, it depends on how much water you're using. If you're using 230 litres a minute...
Well, assume that at the highest pressure, how long would the jet...
5-6 minutes.
And assuming, adopting those assumptions still, how long would it take for a tank to refill?
It depends what you're getting in again.
Okay. And again, the pressure that an LWPP would normally operate upon would depend upon the particular circumstances.
Yeah, normally optimum performance is 4 bar.
4 bar?
Yeah, and I think you get 1,000 litres a minute.
And presumably, just for the avoidance of doubt, you can increase the pressure on the LWPP as you could for the ground monitor?
Yeah, but it doesn't always give you more water because of the pressure.
Could I just go back to the turntable ladder and really the operation of pressure there? And could I ask you to go back to page 5 in your statement? And if this could be done at the top of page 6 as well. At the bottom of page 5 and the top of page 6, you explain water flow and the pressure operation of the turntable ladder. Now, before you reduced the pressure, what was your view of the effectiveness of the jet being deployed from the turntable itself?
I don't know if it's hard to really remember back. It's all sort of a blur. I don't know if it was having any effect or if it was working. I'm not too sure, to be honest with you.
Okay. And after you changed the strategy and reduced the pressure from 10 to...
Oh, the reason why we changed it, basically we was using all the water so quickly, so that's the reason why we changed it. So we thought, instead of giving it optimum pressure to have a good reach and then waiting again for the actually no water to be on it, we decided to lower the pressure so you got a constant flow of water.
And how long did the water supply last for before the tank was emptied after you decreased the pressure to 8 or 7 bar?
Slightly longer, but I don't know. I mean, I think I was just guessing on the my statement.
I don't want you to guess, but can you give us even the minutest of indications?
It was lasting longer when we changed it, but obviously I don't know. I didn't have it. I wasn't timing it, so.
And again, this may be a question that asks the obvious. Does reducing pressure reduce the height the jet can reach? Yeah. And looking at the tower itself, how many did it reduce it in terms of 1 floor, 2 floors, using that as a gauge?
Maybe 1 or 2 floors, yeah.
Now, where you have problems such as this, is it the usual strategy to moderate pressure so as to achieve a greater, more constant supply of water?
I've not really had this sort of problem, to be fair. It was somewhat unprecedented for me, to be fair.
And did you make the decision to reduce the pressure yourself, or did you consult with others or a more senior officer?
I spoke to the crew manager on top of the cage.
And what did you say to him? Can you remember now the gist of the words?
Basically, just we're running out of water really quickly. I can reduce the pressure so you get constant water.
And what did he say to that?
Try that, yeah. Somewhere along the lines of, yeah, we'll try that.
Were you aware of who the incident commander was at this stage in the operation when you reduced the pressure on the turntable?
It would have been still Mike Dowden.
And in your recollection, what effect did reduction of pressure have on the success in containing fire spread?
Not a lot, really. It was just that you had a constant flow of water.
And did you pass on your view that its efficacy and effectiveness wasn't up to much to any more senior officer?
No.
Could I ask why you wouldn't do that normally?
Because my first line of line manager was actually in the cage, so he was fully aware of it himself.
Going back to the question of the lightweight portable pump, would those pumps have been available earlier in the evening?
They're on every single, not every single, they're on every pump.
And would there be 1, 2, how many would be carried on?
One on every pump, but obviously the pump ladder wouldn't have one because it's got different stowage.
Okay. But an Alpha 212 would have had one?
Yep.
And if they had been, do you know when the lightweight portable pump started to be deployed on the night? The first time you saw a pump being deployed?
It was really late or early in the morning, sort of like maybe 5 or 6 o'clock, maybe later than that even.
If they'd been deployed earlier, what effect do you think it would have had on containing fire spread?
Little.
And why do you say that?
Because the fire spread was externally. The lightweight port pump was in the stairwells. So I think you needed to put more water on the outside of the building as well as inside.
Thank you. Sir, those are all the questions I have for Mr. Keane. It might be appropriate now to take a break.
Well, I was just thinking we could have a break now, and if you have any further questions after the break, you can put them, and if you don't, well, we'll thank Mr. Keane and send him on his way.
That was the plan, so quarter of an hour, sir?
Yes, I suppose if that's convenient, that's what we'll do.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Keane, we're going to have a break now.
Yep.
I don't know whether Mr. Kinnear will have some more questions for you after the break or not. We'll just have to wait and see.
No problem.
So we'll sit again at 11:15, and then we'll know whether there's some more questions for you or not. So if you'd like to go with the usher now, please don't talk to anyone else about your evidence or anything to do with it while you're out of the room. All right? Thanks so much. Right, 11:15 then, please. Right, Mr. Keane's on his way, I think.
Thanks, sir.
Right, Mr. Keane?
Yep.
Happy to continue?
Yep.
I'm not sure there are going to be many questions, but we'll see. Now, Mr. Kinnear.
Mr. Keane, many thanks for your patience. Just have two very brief questions
Yep.
for you. First of all, do you know how many ALPs the LFB has in London?
No, not off the top of my head, no.
Secondly, did you know that Gareth Cook had been appointed the water supply officer?
Not sure.
Okay. Mr. Keane, that concludes the questions I have for you. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, I don't have any further questions, so Mr. Keane, it just remains for me to thank you very much for coming to give your evidence. It's a very helpful thing to do, and we're very grateful to you for
No problem at
coming
all.
to do it. And that's it, you're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, you go with the usher, that'll be fine. Now then, Mr. Kinnear, what's next?
So the final bit in relation to evidence for today is reading in of evidence in relation to five particular witnesses, namely Alexandra Norman, Debbie Real, Peter May, Peter Duddy and Sarah Russell. The references in respect of Alexandra Norman are MET *000 80589 for the statement. In respect of her contemporaneous note, MET *000 5199. In respect of Miss Real, the reference for the statement is MET *000 7696. In respect of her two exhibits, MET 000 13083 and MET 000 13082. In respect of Mr. May, relativity reference for the statement is *000 7895. Contemporaneous note MET 000 15882. In respect of Mr. Duddy, the statement reference is MET *000 7787. And finally, in respect of Miss Russell, the statement reference is MET *000 7698. So that deals with the evidence-related matters before you today. There are 2 points of housekeeping.
Now, before we go to the housekeeping, I wondered whether it would be helpful to people to know that the statements to which you've referred will now form part of the evidence before the inquiry and will be posted on the inquiry's website so that anyone who wishes to read them can do so.
Thank you, sir. Yes. So turning to housekeeping,
Yes.
First of all, I have an application on behalf of Mr. Millett. It's standard application, I'm afraid, and that's to invite you to start at 9:30 tomorrow morning.
Yes.
To allow us to deal with all three witnesses that are timetabled to be
We've
dealt
got
with.
quite a full timetable tomorrow, haven't we?
It is, sir.
And it would be nice to complete it.
It would, yes.
And so with that in mind, although I have no doubt that a 9:30 start is not congenial to everyone, I think we should do that.
I'm
so
grateful.
we will sit at 9:30 tomorrow.
And so the final element of housekeeping is that the intention is to publish next week's timetable today, if it hasn't already been published. And it's hoped that the timetable for the week commencing the 30th of July will also be published. If not today, then certainly tomorrow.
Good. Thank you very much.
So that concludes today's business.
And that's it for today, right. Well, thank you all very much. It's been a rather short day, though I've no doubt you can use the rest of it profitably. And we'll resume tomorrow morning at 9:30, please. Thank you very much.